This program is made possible in part by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider This, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bale Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to Consider This. We are in the Student Center and at UNO, and we are, just like everyone else, wondering, has anything happened in the last few minutes, in the last hour, that we need to know about? That's how anxious we are about what is happening in this world today in the wake of September 11th. And my guests today are hopefully, and I think they will, they certainly do give me a little peace of mind in terms of preparedness if the worst kinds of things should happen in our area. Steve Lee is with us. He's director of Douglas County Emergency Management. He's been in the then civil defense business and now in what they're calling emergency management to sort of stay in line with the FEMA moniker. And also with us today is Dr. Stephen Hinrichs, who's director of the Nebraska Public Health Laboratory. He is also an associate professor at the University of Nebraska Medical Center in microbiology and virology.
That's correct.
Am I getting that right?
That's
right.
A
mouthful. I really want to thank you. I know you have been trying to get your regular jobs done and staying prepared for any of this, and you teaching and researching. At the same time, people need to hear your voices. They need to hear the voices of, yeah, you know, we're doing the best we can, and maybe even around here we're doing better. You are in charge of basically the metro area in some respects. Is that
Douglas
not right?
County.
Because we have a grant, the City of Omaha does, that is coordinating a lot of things. Give us a sense of where we sort of stand. I mean, we're not ready for the worst right now to happen to everybody. I know that.
Well, I think it's important that people know that we have always been reasonably prepared for this type of event. It's not that as if something would happen, we would stand around and shrug our shoulders. Our planning process has always been an integrated approach to address almost any kind of contingency would come up. Obviously, we're not 100% prepared for this one, but by the same token, we're well on our way to being able to meet the needs should that situation arise.
Now, I spoke some time ago, not very far away, a week or so ago, with Pat Lenahan, who co-chairs the group that's sort of working through a grant that Omaha's received to get everybody on the same page, make sure that every entity involved in police, fire, hospitals, all the responders, that they are working together. And the one thing I got from her and a lot of other people I called was that really, and this is before 911, as they say, 9/11, unprecedented cooperation, that in Omaha, Nebraska at least, in the metro area, turf is not a problem. And boy, I've seen turf battles in my years.
Well, what you're referring to, Pat Lenahan is co-chair of the Omaha Metropolitan Medical Response System, and that is a program, or a grant rather, through the Federal Department of Health and Human Services to the City of Omaha, and its specific intent was to prepare the medical community in our area and give them the tools and the training and the initial types of equipment they would need to respond to terroristic events, specifically mass casualties for weapons of mass destruction. That process we've been working on for about 2 years now. But prior to that, because you alluded to earlier how Omaha might be a little bit ahead of some of the cities, following the Nunn-Lugar-Domenici Domestic Preparedness Act of 1996, federal grants became available for cities to prepare and equip themselves for these kinds of events. Omaha was on the second tier of cities, and starting in late 99-2000, we had some tabletop exercises and some full-scale exercises that covered some of the scenarios we're dealing with today. And as a result of that, the Omaha Fire Department was able to enhance some of their equipment and training and awareness procedures to deal with these events. Following that, the grant for OMERS became available, and its monies are to specifically enhance the medical community's capability to do that. So in conjunction with the planning that we already had in place and these two different tracks that have been going on for over 3 years, we were a little bit ahead of the curve on this, and we're accelerating faster.
Statewide, they have been preparing for a few years. This is not something new. I understand, Dr. Hinrichs, that the state of Nebraska a few years ago started thinking biological chemical and started putting their eggs not in the possibility of biological warfare or terrorism because it's the most likely, but because it was something they could really get a handle on. And they received a lot of grant money. And is that when your lab, the lab that's located at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, the emergency lab,
Preparedness lab,
went into effect? Give us a little thumbnail of
sure.
how the state's been prepared.
Actually, the laboratory first began or got organized at the medical center maybe 2.5, almost 3 years ago now. And the issues relating to bioterrorism began, at least surfaced in our area, about 2 years ago. And that's when we then began to focus on this topic and receive federal funding in order to get organized and be prepared as best as possible. So let's say about 2.5 years, something like that.
So in other words, the state of Nebraska, Douglas County, did not wait. They're always doing emergency preparedness. I mean, we know that our State Patrol, our Nebraska National Guard, that our local agencies have, but they have been honing in on these possible areas for a few years.
Absolutely, that's correct.
If I can use an analogy, you remember the old paint by number kits where you'd get an easel with a picture and you would maybe have 20 colors. Well, the situation we're in is if we're working with 20 colors to complete our picture, 9 through 20 have been completed. 1, 2, and 3 are completed. We're in the process now of finishing those in-between things. That section of time between our initial equipment to take care of a small base population if this event would occur to that point in time when state and federal resources become available. One of the committees under OMERS is lab, infection control, and surveillance. And the doctor might want to elaborate on this a little later. But one of the tasks that we have set for ourselves in terms of biological and chemical agents is early awareness. So we're trying to develop a matrix whereby our surveillance of these events will be enhanced and quickened so we can respond even quicker. And that's one of those shaded areas that we're working on and trying to enhance, because as you know, many of these symptoms, especially in the bacterial area, they manifest themselves with flu-like symptoms. We want to be able to maybe track through asking various pharmacies and medical houses what kind of supplies have people been asking for, have people been having extraordinary respiratory problems, itches, rashes, other unusual events, so that we can test and maybe identify and isolate sooner. That's one of the things we're working on right now. OMERS has 8 committees, and that's one of them.
And this is happening statewide in a sense too, not just on the. One of the things that they're doing is setting up a statewide kind of a communication system so that the pharmacies out in North Platte could be in touch with the health department, and they in touch with you, doctor.
That's been identified as one of the biggest needs in Nebraska, as it would be in any rural state where there are pockets and concentrations of population and then many miles, hundreds of miles in between. And establishing communication is essential in a state like ours. And unfortunately, we found out that many of our important rural communities don't have internet providing service. They are only reachable by telephone, for example.
And that's a time-consuming process.
That does not allow us to deliver the amount of information we need in a timely way or to monitor situations. So that's definitely one of the issues that we want to work on more.
In fact, Senator Hagel was the co-sponsor of a bill that was introduced last week that, among other things, including agricultural food safety issues and some things, talked about this communication system because people are concerned about how fast can people really react. You would have to identify that something, and would the doctors know to see this is more than just, there's something more here. So there's that education process of doctors, pharmacies, all this. Then you would have to respond. You would have to verify in your lab. So there's time. So any communication time added would be
very valuable.
Yeah.
In fact, both of our senators have introduced legislation that would be of great help to the state of Nebraska. Hagel's bill focusing very similar to the idea that we have about establishing a communication network would be helpful. Senator Nelson's bill allowing for the providing of block grants to states would also be very helpful. Both of those approaches would be successful, I would think.
The word anthrax, we had heard it before this past week when it cropped up in Florida, that it was one of the agents that could be released. Everyone was putting out these scenarios, and if you want to blame the news media, they were doing it, but scenarios that could happen. And anthrax was one of the ones suggested in there, other ones, the plague, smallpox. I mean, there is actually a group of the kinds of things that some nutcases or terrorists could send out that you have become familiar with now. Is that right? That you can identify a lot quicker?
That's really what the laboratory's been working on for the past year, is the ability to identify the vast majority of organisms that we think could be used in a biological attack, and those capabilities are now in place. What we're working on now is sharing that information with laboratories throughout the state, at hospitals, physicians' offices, etc. And that's the stage that we're at right now. But we definitely have the ability to identify organisms that are on the suspect list.
This situation in Florida with the anthrax, it has been identified. At this taping, there are 3 people that apparently have the bacteria, or I don't know exactly what to say, they're infected in real broad layman's terms. If that were to happen here, God forbid, what would be the first thing that you folks would hear? If somebody got sick, goes to the hospital, then run us through, let's put it, not a tabletop here, but a scenario of what might happen.
I'm going to defer that to the doctor, but I do want to make a statement first, and I'll get back to OMERS again on this, because another one of our committees is pharmacy. And one of the things that the OMERS group has developed and is in the process of getting out is what we call a quick reference sheet for these biochemical agents, what their immediate and long-term effects might be, and what some of the possible medicines and remedies are. We'll be in the process of distributing those to first responders and physicians and emergency departments in our hospitals around here, because as you well know, many of the kinds of things we're talking about, many doctors and health professionals have never seen them.
Never seen.
May not recognize the signs or learn to discriminate between, once again, those flu-like symptoms and other situations. Not all of them are flu-like symptoms, but a big class have
Something
that.
that you see in other infections.
So I'm going to let the doctor handle this, because that's specifically his area, but I did want to let you know that OMERS is a wide spectrum of meeting these little gaps that we need to fill in, so we will enhance the awareness of people in our facility. Public health and lab will definitely be people involved in this identification. And what do you think would happen following an event like that?
Well, we have a number of surveillance activities that are in place, and they would result in the either identification of a specimen or a cluster of symptoms that would be suspicious for what we are considering to be either an anthrax outbreak or something along those lines. There's no doubt that would result. But I think what people need to hear about and know about is not just about the scare or the fear of anthrax, but what in fact would we expect them to do? What would we ask the average citizen to do, and what should they be doing? And what I want them all to know is that they should be contacting their private physician first and saying to them, I have these unusual symptoms, I don't know what to do about it, I'm feeling very anxious about it, what should I do? It would not be appropriate for them to go running to an emergency room that they'd never seen before and never visited, when in fact they have a physician who they've worked with over the years.
I guess the question, and I would agree with you, and I think that's what I would do, but the question is, would everyone in Omaha and Nebraska at this point in time feel confident that the doctor, although could not identify the disease, I mean, we can't even identify the flu. We go by flu-like symptoms, and then, in certain occasions we test to see if the presence of flu is actually in our community. But can we be confident, or will we soon be able to be confident, that a doctor, physician's assistant, the people we see, will make note of this, will make note of something you know, 2 of me walking in or 3 of me walking in? Is this going to be a very, are they going to be sensitized to this?
Well, you can be sure that it's not just the population at large who's been receiving a lot of information about anthrax, but our physicians throughout the state have as well. Our state epidemiologist is very active in this regard, notifying them about the symptoms that they might experience or might see. But there's another whole important piece to this, and that is the story likely to occur, or is the scenario in which the patient occurred or the events occurred around this event likely to support the diagnosis of anthrax? And there are a number of those types of things that have to fit into place for it to be a likely story.
But the detective work that has to go into this, and I don't mean like necessarily police detectives, although they may play a part, but the medical detective work that has to go into this has to be fairly rapid. I'm not saying you have to have magical, mystical powers, but in the very, very off chance that this would happen, a lot of this has to telescope into a very small amount of time.
Well, I think the Florida case is a prime example of the enhanced awareness already. The individual that was unfortunate enough to contract it and died, this was within a week to 10-day period, and they were able to isolate back to where he worked and find other people, and in fact find the very object from which the contamination emanated from relatively fast. That kind of a scenario, that kind of investigative process, that kind of diagnosis and lab testing is only going to enhance because of the awareness factor. I might even say that right now the sensitivity might be too high. We don't want to overburden our medical systems this winter with everybody getting the flu, being overly worried and concerned that they have anthrax, and taxing the system and taking medicines they don't need to take that could in fact be dangerous in the long run.
But you
That's
have a good point, Carol, and that is that we are really and truly a society, and we have to succeed as a society, and the health of everyone is important. And there may be findings that occur in an individual, but it's really the question of how is everyone in an area doing, how is everybody in the region or in the house doing. And those are the questions that we're going to be asking and have to respond to.
There's so much talk about gas masks and, you know, getting penicillin or whatever the proper antibiotic would be for any of these and things, hoarding them away. I mean, I know my gut reaction is, hey, if I happen to be the first person in contact with the anthrax deal, I'm gone anyway. And you know, hopefully this will never happen. But if it does, I have actually more faith than usual in our system that they'll, at least the people that come after me that get it will be, or there will be prevention in them getting it. So I don't, you know, gas mask is not a personal option for me. But people are concerned. What should be my personal options? How far should I go to relieve my anxiety? And I think there's just an aggregate anxiety level right now.
Well, I'll address it on a very personal level. I know that I have a physician and physicians at the medical center who can get me what we would call a fluoroquinolone antibiotic in a very short period of time, and that there are enough doses to treat a large number of people in this area as well. In addition, a significant amount of that antibiotic can be brought into the Omaha area in a very rapid period of time, and Steve might want to address that as well. But for me personally, I do not have a tube or a vial of fluoroquinolone or ciprofloxacin at the present time in my house waiting for me to get the sniffles. And that's a very appropriate approach. I don't have a gas mask. On the other hand, I recognize that I'm a member of society and that there will be some type of an early event and some individuals may get ill, but we'll be able to respond to that and prevent disease in the vast majority of our population.
And you do have it at your lab, or you can get it because you do work, you know, with agents, so that's just good practice.
Correct.
Good
Well,
practice.
the individuals who are in the laboratory working with these organisms, running through protocols, procedures, they have access to it in a very short period of time too, but again, we would go to the pharmacy to get it. It's not as if they're taking it on a daily basis.
I know Pat Lenahan again told me that part of this OMERS thing is that that pharmacies are constantly keeping tabs on certain things, that they are in constant communication with their suppliers as to how fast they can get things, that there are, they know that they're going to have so much in the pipeline here already of certain kinds of things that might be needed. Is that
Right.
fair?
Part of the goal is to establish a baseline need and get our community equipped to handle from 1 to 10,000 patients of this. And from that, when we find out that we need more medicines and assistance and help, what's commonly referred to as a push pack of materials and equipment would be requested from the Center for Disease Controls in Atlanta, and it's an airplane that's roughly the size of a 767 that has these additional supplies and equipment on it that would be sent into this area. And we're working with the state on making the coordination for how this would be distributed, where it would land, and who would handle it. So we're in that process. Again, I will keep wanting to refer to my picture where we've got some areas tightened up very well, some on both ends, but we're in the middle of making it more solid and putting it together. And that's the process that we're in. But I'd also like to go back and maybe disagree with you just on one point.
Well, most
if you were the
people do.
first one to get anthrax, it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion that you are gone. In fact,
and that
as
is
you said.
correct from a medical point of view. I guess I've just allowed myself a certain amount of fatalism,
Sure.
Because
We want you around a few more
maybe
years.
that's the level I can live with, or which is a poor choice of words. But I mean, I guess I'm more concerned about my son. I'm more concerned, that everyone in my community basically is safe, and that if something horrible happened, if I would be the first one to hit this stuff, I could live with the fact that I trust that you will save. You people will put into play a plan. Now maybe people will say, well, as a journalist you should push them more and you shouldn't even feel like that. But I guess I do, because I've lived here a long time. I've lived through the tornado of '75. I lived through, and we had hitches in '97 when the ice storm came. But I think that this community in this state learns lessons very easily. I mean, maybe I'm too optimistic.
No, you've made some excellent points. I was working for the agency in 1975. We did not have an emergency operations center for the blizzard of '75 and the tornado of '75. Now we do. The professionals have been aware of this kind of scenario for a long time, and quite honestly, we couldn't get people to think about it that seriously. Well, it's been very demonstrative now that it can happen on our shores, and in fact it can happen. So we have everyone's attention. Congress, local and state governments are working diligently to meet these issues, and I have every confidence that all challenges in this area will be met in every aspect, and the level of work and energy that's going into providing the protection that you want for you and your family is in place right now, and I think we should be proud of the efforts not only that our nation but our community has put towards this.
I appreciate the position you're taking. Really what you're saying is you are a member of society, and part of your role then is to maintain a positive attitude about what's happening.
Not put my head in the sand.
Right?
But
True, and no one wants to be a victim. None of us want to be the first one that gets ill with this problem. But you have a reasonable expectation that you are going to be well cared for should that occur, and that our infrastructure is such that the vast majority of our population will be protected and the vast majority of people will survive. That's the situation that we're in, and unfortunately that's what's changed in America after September of this year.
I have less faith in the airline industry, only because not because they are a commercial operation, but because who runs the safety of airlines is a mixed breed right now. It's a hybrid, and they're kind of at sixes and sevens of how, the system is everything. What system do we put in place is a good system, and is everybody on board, so to speak. I feel more confident in the public health and public protection. Maybe that because I'm closer to that than to the CEO of the airlines.
Well, I've flown 3 times now since the attack, and every time I've seen a greater level of security. In fact, I was also in New York, and it was very impressive security that was there. And I personally did not fear for my life or fear for what I was going through at any of those flights. So I feel that that's being approached very well indeed.
Now, Steve, you mentioned that not you personally, but you as a member of the emergency management community have had concern for some time that this could happen. This kinds of things could happen. Just the permutations and combinations. There are bioagents out there. There are evil people. These things could happen. It doesn't take, a brain surgeon to figure this out. No offense to doctors, Dr. Henry. But the reason I bring up the airline industry is because we had Lockerbie. We had a possible threat over TWA-800, and reams of paperwork was written with recommendations to tighten security, to say we've learned our lessons, and we are humans, that when we get far enough time and distance from danger, there must be some mathematical formula, but time and distance from danger then diminishes our concern.
Well, I think I know what you're saying, and I think I would answer it this way. There has been, and there probably will continue to be, some finger pointing towards the national government, especially on whether we had sufficient warning and acted appropriately regarding our September 11th attack. And you mentioned Lockerbie. One of the things that has changed since that time, and it's irreversibly changed, and we alluded to it earlier, it has been shown that it can happen here, and it has happened on our shorelines. I think to a certain degree, a blind eye or a winking eye was giving towards, yeah, go ahead and plan and study for that, but it won't really happen. Our shores are protected. It can happen here. Now that we know that it has, we have seen, quite frankly, the might and the resolve of the United States. Look what we have accomplished in just 30 days. We know every step these terrorists took prior to crashing those planes into the buildings. We've got the world by and large cooperating with us. Our medical community is organized. There's less bipartisanship, or there's more bipartisanship rather, in our Congress to pass these rules and regulations. So I have hope and confidence that this will work out, and I think, unfortunately, one of the things that have made that permanent difference is the fact that it's demonstrated that it can happen here, so the awareness and the resolve to solve this will go forward. The airlines, I agree with you. I think in the final run, this is new for them too. They're mixing and matching and trying different things. I watch the news reports as you do at night, and they're a little confused about what can come on and what can't. I think ultimately the U.S. government will take over the security issue. I'm going to assume that will be better.
So we've reached kind of a new paradigm due to, in large part, because it happened here.
Well, I think we've definitely seen a change in America. And one of the strengths of America is to find something positive even out of the worst scenarios. And maybe our growing together, our communication, our more focus on family is an important outcome of this. And so let's focus on whatever positives we can.
I'll end on that. Thank you so much, Steve Lee and Dr. Stephen Henricks. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us this week on Consider This.
This program is made possible in part by Nebraskans for Public Television.